Hello viewers, and welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. I am your book reviewer, and today we're going to review the book, there we go, Fallout by Ellen Hopkins. And this is the third book in the trilogy of the Crank series, I guess if you want to call it. I've already read Crank and Glass, and as you recall, at the end of Glass, I told you that I was looking for this book, mostly at the library, and I ended up finding it, so I was very excited about that. So let's get started. If you remember from the Crank and Glass series, those two books focused on a girl named Christina Snow, and at the end of both books, and incidentally she gets pregnant from the use of the drug meth, and because meth kind of takes over your mind and makes you do crazy things, as many drugs do. So, and if you remember from the last book of Glass, that she ended up with her boyfriend Trey, and she ended up being picked up by the police and being in jail. And it was in jail that she realized she was pregnant with her second child. And that's kind of where Glass ended. And this book, Fallout, it kind of goes about 15 years into the future, or maybe about like 17 years into the future, and it focuses on 3 of Christina's children. It turns out that Christina has 5 children, and the 3 oldest children, 2 boys and a girl, or 2 girls and a boy, excuse me, all kind of intertwine in this book, and they are different sectioned off in this book. So if you've read any other books other than the Crank series, if you read any other books by Ellen Hopkins, she does that sometimes in the books like Impulse and Identical, and I'm sure others maybe that I haven't read yet. She takes multiple characters and kind of puts them in the same book, but then gives them their own personality and their own separate story, and kind of the only way you know about it is when their name is on the top of the page. So that was very helpful for here. And her oldest child, as you may remember, was born at the end of Crank. She named him Hunter, and in this book Fallout, he is 19. He is a student at the University of Nevada in Reno, studying communications and radio broadcasting. He has a job as a DJ for a radio station in at the campus, so most of his time is spent with that. And he lives with his grandparents, technically as they are, but he calls them mom and dad through the whole thing, because when he was young they adopted him, because he would really have no relationship with Christina, and she was busy using drugs and things to ever really be a real mother to him. So her mother and stepfather adopted Hunter and as their own, so that was nice for them. And he rarely has any contact with his mother. He knows who she is, but again, he rarely has contact, and through most of his life is consumed again with work and kind of home life. And his girlfriend Nikki, who is, I don't know if she's also a student at the University of Nevada, she owns an apartment there, so maybe, or she lives in an apartment there, and he lives with her half the time and at home the other half. And they kind of have a teenage romance, I guess, if you will. They do have issues that that hinder their relationship. He does cheat on her with a groupie, I guess, if you will, a big fan of his show, and Nikki finds out about it, and he shuts him out. And then also a lot of things are happening in Hunter's life where his mother he's always haunted by his mother, and he's realizing that his biological father is in his area, and he runs into him from time to time, and he can sense that it's him, kind of. He does look like him, he realizes, and he kind of confronts his father that way, was saying, oh, don't you see the resemblance in us, and you're my father, and you raped my mother. And he was like, whoa, yeah, I kind of did, but she wanted it the same, and it was just kind of weird. So he's very, because of that, he's very standoffish with Nikki as well. He doesn't like to delve into his problems, even though Nikki's kind of having her own family problems as well. Her parents' marriage is failing, so she's trying to connect with him that way, but he's just not having it. And again, with his infidelity, makes his and her relationship very hard. So that's kind of where Hunter is going at the moment. And next I want to start with her second child, who she was pregnant with at the end of Glass. Her name turns out to be Autumn, and she lives with her grandfather and her aunt on her father's side. Christina's boyfriend Trey is the father of Autumn, and when they found out, his father and his sister decided to adopt Autumn and take her as far away from Reno as they could. So they live in San Antonio, Texas, and Autumn has no contact whatsoever with Christina. She has little contact with Trey, but it's very minimal. Trey's father is very mad at him always, and Trey tries to call his father, and his father is very mean to him and very rude, and so he tries to keep Autumn safe out of his clutches and out of his power of drugs and influence and things like that. So again, Autumn is kind of a typical teenager. I think she's about 17. And she ends up falling in love with this man named Bryce, and who goes to her school down in San Antonio, and she's just kind of head over heels in love with him, and they end up, of course, getting together, and having sex and things like that. And so it's just kind of a typical teenage thing, and it's very Ellen Hopkins makes it very visual and very descriptive and things like that. So that was nice to read. And through Autumn's life, along with living with her grandfather, her Aunt Cora, who is kind of in her mid-30s, she falls in love with this man named Liam, and they end up getting married through the book. So Autumn is kind of reeling with that here this woman was kind of a motherly figure to her, but yet not, she was young, but kind of motherly and sisterly in a way. And she's leaving to be with her husband, who lives in Austin, which is about a 98-minute ride away. So she feels very lonely, and I guess that's why she finds herself needing somebody like Bryce and things like that. And I'll leave with her in a second. And then the third child that you never really hear about in previous books, but it happened, was a girl named Summer. Summer in the trilogy has the saddest story of them all, because she was really never adopted by any member of her family, and she ends up being tossed from foster home to foster home, and currently at the beginning she's in a foster facility, and she gets into a big fight with another foster child in this home, because of then there was like a third child who accused the one that Summer got in a fight with of abuse, and so and apparently Summer had that abuse as well. That's never really divulged in this book, but you can kind of tell that Summer was abused as a child by a trusted person. So, and so she's kicked out, and Summer actually ends up living with her father at a time, for a time, and his father's girlfriend, and you don't know her father's name. His last name is Kenwood because her last name is Kenwood. So, but again, you never really know how you do know how he's tied in with Christina, but you never really know their story in a way. She does ask her father how he met her mother, and he ended up being a friend of Trey's, who she had kind of an affair with, and bore a child that way, and then that caused her rift with her and Trey and things like that. And Summer is kind of the one who has the most contact with her mother, but it's never good. Her mother calls her in anger, rages, and wonders why she doesn't love her and why she never contacts her. And she's like, well, you really never loved me. You were never really a mother to me, and things like that. And Summer is kind of torn with her relationships. She is kind of dating a man named Matt at the beginning of the book, but then she realizes that they're more friend material, and she's really interested in Matt's best friend Kyle, and especially when she realizes what her mother did, and she cheated on Summer's father, or she cheated on her husband Trey with Summer's father, who ended up being Trey's best friend, and she was running, oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing to Matt and Kyle. I'm kind of becoming my mother in a way, and that's very scary. So, but all of a sudden, just being in different foster homes takes its toll on Summer, and she's thinking, we've got to get out of here. I've got to leave my area, and she's in Bakersfield, California, most of, that's kind of in the area where she is, and so she and Kyle run away, drive away, and they end up driving north, kind of towards, Reno, and this is kind of after Thanksgiving, kind of close to Christmas, and, which brings us back to, like, Autumn, and Autumn has suddenly a relationship with Trey. He comes back to San Antonio, and he is like, well, I'm going to take you to go meet your mother, because I want to see your mom again, and I want to make things right, and so do you want to come to Reno with me, because she's going to spend Christmas with her family? And so Autumn was like, well, yeah, sure, I know I could get totally burned by this, but hey, I'd love to meet my mother. And Autumn is another really sad thing, is Autumn never knows that she has siblings. She always thinks that it's just her. And so when Trey tells her that not only does she have another sister, but she has 3 brothers. And the other 2 younger brothers are Christina's from a man named Ron, who is kind of an ex-boyfriend at the time, who is very abusive, and you kind of learn that through different swatches of different people, mostly through Hunter, mostly with Hunter's grandmother or guardian telling him about things and things like that. So, and so it happens at the end, kind of at the end of the book, that the 3 siblings finally meet. It was very cool, and I was kind of figuring that was going to happen as I read along, and I liked that it happened. And it doesn't end, the way Crank or Glass does, with this kind of revelation or kind of like, oh, I've screwed up my life and things like that. It just kind of ends, because luckily none of the children are, none of them are addicted to meth. Hunter does pot, and then Autumn kind of gets into alcoholism a little bit, but it doesn't really consume her. She does drink to kind of heal, but she doesn't become a raging alcoholic or anything like that. And then later, at kind of the end, Christina kind of realizes that she's ruined a lot of people's lives through her drug use and things like that. So I don't know. It never tells what she wants to do with it, or if she ever tries to make amends or try or anything. Again, meth is a horrible drug, so and it was explained that it eats at your emotions towards other people, so I don't know if she ever could. One of the things also that I liked about the book is that through mostly when it kind of started with Hunter again, because it kind of went Hunter, autumn, summer, and then back to Hunter, autumn, summer, kind of in a nice little pattern. But when it got to Hunter, they would put in kind of false newspaper clippings about things that went on in like Glass and Crank, and kind of tied up loose ends in a way. And that I liked that because, what happened to like kind of the secondary characters in Crank, like other boyfriends that Christina had, or another friends that she had, kind of what happened to them. And nothing really good, obviously, but this book series was never meant to be funny, but so it's kind of like a Shakespearean tragedy where just things befall everybody and everything. So anyway, that's it. I'm very glad that I was able to finish this series, and I guess on that subject of finishing series, my next book is the third book in the Hunger Games trilogy. It's called Mockingjay, which of course follows the story of Katniss. So I'm excited about that, and I bid you all a good evening and happy reading.